You know, President Trump obviously knew what he was doing first term, knew it very well. This time it's like on steroids, and we knew exactly what we needed to do then, and we know even more so what we need to do now. Now, I don't mean that necessarily in terms of privatization. I mean that just generally. For instance, my predecessor was Mark Calabria in the first term. He worked very hard on this issue, but he worked hard on other issues. Many of the ideas that he didn't get done in his first term, we're now able to execute on and really drive performance in the business. And that's really where our focus is right now.
So on the issue of privatization as well, what could be different this time?
Well, I think right now what we're doing is making sure that these businesses are actually functioning as businesses, where people would find them attractive, where they weren't run with big bloat, where they weren't social engineering programs run by, let's say, politicians, but instead where they were focused on safety and soundness and earnings. I mean, Sonali, we had 16,000 people that were working from home, essentially. We ordered them all back to work. We're driving efficiency in these companies. If I told you the waste, fraud, and abuse we found, you wouldn't even believe some of the stuff we found.
Well, be specific there. You've been talking about waste, fraud, and abuse within the agencies. What exactly had been happening?
Well, we, for instance, recently criminally referred some North Koreans and Chinese for working inside of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I mean, what are the Chinese and the North Koreans doing in these companies? That's just one example. I could give you other examples of contracts that we've done. The bureaucracy between FHFA, so the U.S. Federal Housing, which I oversee, and the companies. We're eliminating the unnecessary bureaucracy between the agency and the companies to get things going. I mean, I've closed out probably over 50, I've made 50 plus directives or closures of excessive paperwork, stuff even going back to Obama's time where they were just reporting on them for no reason. The amount of nonsense going on is truly staggering, and these are going to be great American icons once again.
I'm sorry, can you be a little more specific there? When you said that there were Chinese and North Koreans working for the agencies, do you mean non-U.S. citizens? What exactly?
Correct. There were non-citizens working who were posing as either real Americans or, in some cases, contractors. And we also recently uncovered some other things where some of the Indians were also working inside of the companies as well. So more to come on that. But I think we've referred 5 or 6 different people to the DOJ just in terms of North Koreans and Chinese working in the companies.
So when it comes to your initiative here to really take a look at, you're saying waste, fraud, and abuse within the agency, is the idea here to clean up the agencies to become private entities?
Well, ultimately, that would be a question for President Trump. President Trump's going to be, obviously, is the deal maker of the century. I mean, there's nobody who knows how to make a deal better than President Trump. So if and when he does that, we will be ready. We are getting ready for just being operationally efficient, not necessarily privatization. And that is really where our focus is right now. If and when something were to happen, our main focus would be to make sure that there was no disruption to the mortgage market and that there wouldn't be any upward pressure on rates.
So ultimately, when it comes to the efficiency plans, how much does it fall on you versus DOJ efforts to tackle them?
Yeah, DOJ has not been involved in Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. We would welcome them, frankly, because I think they're very bright people. But we are doing our own cost cutting, our own trimming of the fat, so to speak, and again, getting rid of some of this fraud. But again, we're really ready to focus and have been focusing, at least since I've been in office 8 weeks, on that operational efficiency side of things.
When you're looking at any potential issues across the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac programs, are you looking at multifamily lending programs specifically?
Yes, I'm very focused on multifamily lending programs. In particular, I was unsettled with some things that I found in multifamily when I first started. That was part of the reason that I did some of the changes that I made at the board level, including the chairmanship, was I felt like I needed to get involved and have the FHFA director be intimately involved in some of the multifamily stuff. And that was one big reason that we've been a little bit more hands-on, is to make sure that there's none of that nonsense going on. The good news is these are safe and sound businesses, but we're going to make them even safer and sounder.
What types of behavior are you looking into exactly when it comes to multifamily?
Well, there's been some things which we'll be releasing at some point where, people were underwriting certain loans and then flipping them either to friends or to colleagues and then re-underwriting them. So, it's mortgage fraud. We've had a big focus on mortgage fraud. We're going to keep focusing on mortgage fraud because we never want to have another '08 happen again. And under President Trump, we're not going to let that happen.
Now, a little earlier, you also said when it comes to the future of Fannie and Freddie, you are keeping your eye closely on mortgage rates. Of course, there's a lot of concern among a number of lawmakers that privatizing Fannie and Freddie could unleash higher rates. How could you ensure that won't happen?
Well, it's something that my friend and colleague, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and I are laser focused on. We'll be working very closely on that, be studying the issue, figuring out what it is that would make sure that if and when that were ever to happen, it wouldn't be the case. But we're not there yet, and as I said, it will ultimately be up to the president, but look forward to working with the Treasury Secretary and making sure that anything we think about doesn't affect the mortgage market in any negative way.
So have you had specific meetings with the Treasury Secretary or the president about a privatization plan?
I don't want to say what meetings we have or haven't had. I do maintain a good relationship with the Treasury Secretary, and I think that he's a great partner in terms of not just the topics that you're mentioning, but also the day-to-day. Treasury has certain rights and ownership in the company, or rights to ownership in the company. And so I'd say one of the best things about this administration is that everybody is working together for the common goal of making America great again. And I'm very confident that that will lean towards making Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac great again. I'm very confident in it.
Ultimately, we're sitting in a period where a lot of people are looking at this as a very serious affordability crisis in the United States. You have a family that's long been in the real estate business. What do you think the administration could be doing to fix it?
Well, first things first is getting rid of inflation. And President Trump, as far as I'm concerned, has been doing a beautiful job on that end. Why? Because inflation kills the economy. It kills the housing economy. Sonali, for the last 4 years, home prices have skyrocketed. The price of drywall, the price of lumber, the price of cabinets, countertops, shower baths, all the raw materials that go into homes skyrocketed. And it made it so people couldn't afford homes. Yes, we have a supply crisis, but we also have an inflation crisis. And President Trump is all over it. And frankly, it's going to require a lot of work to reverse what's happened the last 4 years.
Speaking of the last 4 years, in it, we have seen significant issues with the banking system as well, and a lot of questions about the federal home loan banks as well. This is something where when you're looking at efficiencies across the system, do you also take a look at governance issues as well?
Yes, I'm focused on the FHL banks, as you mentioned. We are the regulator of those banks. I'm very focused on it. I met recently with the presidents of those banks and told them a little bit about my expectations around regulations and making sure that they don't get out over their skis, and that we're going to be focused very closely on it. It's not something that gets a lot of attention, like the prospective privatization or not of Fannie and Freddie, but those banks are very important, as you know. We have $1 trillion worth of assets on the balance sheet, and we fund a lot of local banks and a lot of local lending. So stay tuned on the banks.
What will change ultimately? Because maybe a lot of other people might not pay attention, but certainly Bloomberg does, the banking system does.
Well, we're going to get rid of the climate requirements and the DEI requirements for board members. These are banks. They need to focus on lending to people in local areas who not only can pay back the loans, but who can benefit from the loans and really spur local economic growth, not on driving climate change programs through these local banks. It's nonsense, and it needs to go. And I told the presidents of the banks that much, and much more to come on that.